giving you the insider takes and the big picture view on the Dogs. This is On the Beat, presented by Ingles, with DawgNation insider Mike Griffith and Cody Chaffins.
Welcome into On the Beat. Happy Monday night to you. Cody Chaffins alongside Mike Griffith. We are in Athens today inside Stegman Coliseum, getting ready for a top 10 showdown just down the road coming up on Saturday night. But you go to a lot of board meetings, Mike. Is that something you've done a lot over your career?
I mean, here and there. I'm wondering where you're taking this one, Cody.
Well, I asked because a lot of times at the beginning of the meeting, they got to go over the minutes from the last, and they said we got to go over old business. Is there old business?
Fair enough.
And I feel like today there's a little bit of old business, but a lot of new business that when you come to this Georgia team and figuring out who they are. So we got a lot to get to on the show today. We'll talk about kind of the identity that Georgia showed in the Auburn game and what that means for this team moving forward. Look ahead. We'll preview Mississippi State. We had a surprise guest at media availability today. We'll talk about that. Of course, we've got our boots on the ground, Mike's 30,000-foot view. We've got so much to get to in today's show, but I figured we probably should just start with this old business, and that is all the controversy that surrounded what happened on the Plains last Saturday.
Well, it's controversy if you're Auburn because you lost, but if you really want to dig deep, there were a couple things that went against Georgia that nobody's talking about. For example, the review was inconclusive of whether or not the ball crossed the goal line. It was ruled not a touchdown on the field. You got to have a camera angle. You can guess, you can wonder, but none of it was conclusive. It happens every week in college football.
Somebody had the best camera angle, in my opinion.
I thought that was pretty good too. But I can't see the ball.
No,
I can't.
And you see the arm
football.
And the Raylan Wilson punch is actually the second punch, so it was already kind of loose in there.
So, but what happens if we were to play this out is that Kyron Jones grabs the ball, falls on a teammate. He's not down. He goes 99 yards. That should have been a touchdown by rule. If that's a fumble before it crosses the plane, which the officials ruled, then that's a live football. And the Georgia player who recovered it did not go down. So Georgia lost 7 points. It could have been 10-7 at halftime instead of 10-3. Nobody's talking about that. And then later in the game, we saw Cash Jones get called for a blindside block, and you go back and you watch the replay. He clearly got in front of the guy and hit him in front of the shoulder pads.
Face to face.
Yeah, Georgia would have been down at the 2-yard line, and they would have gotten at least 3, if not 7 points. Instead, they miss a field goal. So you're talking about a 10 to 14-point swing that went against Georgia. But all the Auburn people want to talk about, and some of the national media, is whether the ball crossed the plane or not, which I have not seen a conclusive indication that it did. 1. And 2, whether or not Kirby Smart called a timeout. And here's my thing, Cody. It didn't matter. If he did or he didn't, they didn't need a timeout. But here's the other thing. It's Kirby Smart's job to help his football team out. If he's able to get the officials to stop play because the Auburn defense was clapping, you can see that on the replay.
Right, that's for sure.
We know there's an infraction there. Why didn't the officials call that? Why aren't we talking about how Auburn was clapping on the field? Why aren't we talking about the whistle that the Georgia players were hearing from the first row or on the first opening drive? But again, people are going to search out controversy if they're on a losing team.
Right.
If you're Georgia, your business is done. You dominated the second half. You showed your players that it is a process. Trust the process. You saw complementary football. One of the Kirby Smart's biggest points of emphasis was stripping the football the last 2 weeks. The coaching paid off. The complementary football kicked in. The defense gets the stop. The offense roars to life and goes 88 yards to kick a field goal. Now it's a one-score game. You go in the locker room and say, guys, we took their best shot. They've run some new stuff that we hadn't seen. Going to make some adjustments. Shut them out the entire second half and win the game going away. So as far as I'm concerned, I don't know what else needs to be said. If you're Georgia, it was a convincing win. It was coaching, it was players, it was execution, it was on the road. And here's the bonus. You got to see a true dual-threat quarterback at the SEC level, Cody. And that experience is going to be very valuable this week.
It is going to come necessary for sure. The show is called On the Beat. Mike and I just walked out of Kirby Smart's press conference a little earlier today. He did address the clapping versus timeout thing. Here is the latest and probably the last we will hear about this.
I talked to no one, the SEC office-wise, and I stand by what I talked about after the game. I'm worried about Ole Miss.
There you go. The easy as that. Did not hear from the SEC, and he is on to Ole Miss. I think one of the other things, though, as we kind of get into the bigger topic of the show, I think the way that Georgia handled that, we heard from Ellis Robinson, because I think Auburn was totally thrown off by all of those things, right? Like they were just distracted, and part of it's because your head coach is out there losing his mind, and Hugh Freeze, and they were distracted the whole rest of the time. Every time they would look up and say, any call that they would not get, they would just go crazy about it. But I thought Ellis Robinson put it a really nice way today in Georgia's press conference. How do y'all get ready for stuff like that? He says, we practice this way. We got to find the calm in the chaos. Yeah. And Georgia was able to find the calm in the chaos. They weren't swept up in, Cash Jones, that call went against us. Yeah. Or, it should have been a touchdown right there. Or all these other things. Georgia doesn't get caught up in it. And I think that's what makes a championship program versus a program that just, it takes that little and you're frazzled and you're off your game.
Yeah, and say this. Gunner Stockton doesn't have the most arm talent in the league. He's not the fastest or the most elusive runner. He's certainly not the most experienced, but he's got a couple of really gritty wins, and what he did in this game was avoid the catastrophic mistake. Now, you might line them up next to each other and say, well, you take Jackson Arnold over him if their helmets were switched because he's a little bit faster, whatever. But Jackson Arnold made a catastrophic mistake that cost his team. Georgia played turnover-free football, and I think this is very important, for the first time since the opening game. Yeah. And that's going to be big against an Ole Miss team that's -4 in turnover differential. Now, we looked at this line, Cody, and I'll be honest, when I saw the line Georgia by 6.5, I was like, wait a minute. Ole Miss is the undefeated team. Ole Miss is in first place. They beat Georgia last year 28-10. It's Lane Kiffin and his number 5 offense in the country. But you look a little bit closer at the numbers, and you look at who Ole Miss has played, and you go, you know what? I think if you're Georgia, you feel pretty good about this. If you play a clean game and you execute, I think Georgia's just a better football team than Ole Miss.
I think another part that's kind of built into that line, Trinidad Chambliss, who is this transfer quarterback who came from literally out of nowhere.
Somewhere up in Michigan. I'm from Michigan. I couldn't put my finger on Ferris State in the mitten. So.
He has come on, and he has been really, really good for Ole Miss, has taken over that starting job, but he hadn't been on the road in the SEC yet. And that's going to be the thing that happens, too. And I think that's probably part of it.
Well, and Kirby's called out the Dawgs, and he doesn't do it often. He just usually assumes that the crowd's going to be there. But he has officially called out the Georgia fan base, saying they need the most explosive, dynamic crowd that they've had of the season. And the reason why is because a lot of what Lane Kiffin does, and a little bit like Spurrier used to, I hate to mention that name, but he makes calls from the sideline while the quarterback is at the line of scrimmage. Now remember, they have that helmet radio communication, Cody, until there's about 15 seconds left on the play clock, and then it cuts out. Now Ole Miss gets the snaps off really fast, about 21 or 22 seconds. All right, what is it, a 45-second play clock?
Right, 40-second, yeah.
Do the math. He's got somebody in his ear telling him where he may want to go that can communicate with him up until 15 on the shot clock, so to speak. So there's a lot of instruction going on, his ability to hear, his ability to take note of Kiffin on the sideline. All that comes into play for this Ole Miss offense. It's not just the quarterback making the right reads. It's Lane Kiffin in that Ole Miss coaching booth.
Yeah, it's something that we've seen now that this in-helmet communications happened. We saw the NFL level. Sean McVay used to famously get in Jared Goff's ear, and literally he walking you through the play. It's almost like having like a tour guide in your ear. All right. You got 2 high safeties here. This guy's, it looks like he might be coming from the left side. We're going to read it here. And that is how the only way you can get a guy to literally come in off the street a few months ago and say, hey, now you're going to run this offense, because you have a guy whose offense it is. And that's what Kirby Smart said today. They're going to be in the right play because they're going to do whatever it takes in those seconds, 25 seconds, to get him in the right play. And you literally have somebody. It's almost, I think about the movie Ratatouille. I don't know if you've had to watch that with the grandkids yet, but it's the rat that's in the hat of the chef, and he's telling him everything, literally pulling the levers. Here's how we're going to make this meal today, and that's what he's doing. He's laying it all out for his quarterback.
Well, and again, we talked about Georgia's experience having faced a true dual threat quarterback in Jackson Arnold. Well, guess who the number 3 fastest team is in the country? The Tennessee Volunteers.
Right.
And Georgia has faced that. Now, You don't want to see 41 points in Sanford Stadium, but the bottom line is a lot of these guys that Georgia has, 54% of the roster, first or second-year players, they'd never done this before. There's a lot of guys doing this for the first time, and now they've been tested by Tennessee, an explosive offense that scores even more points and runs plays even faster than Ole Miss. They've been tested by Jackson Arnold, a true dual-threat quarterback, very strong runner, Cody. They did some really nice things. So these Georgia players, as we go to the second half of the regular season, this is Game 7,
right.
These guys have been there and done it. Not just the offseason work, not just the spring drill, not just iron sharpens on iron, but on SEC Saturdays in two of the most hostile, intimidating stadiums in the country, Neyland Stadium and Jordan-Hare, these Georgia Bulldogs have gotten it done. And quite frankly, coulda, shoulda, woulda against Alabama if a freshman throws a block. So, again, I think Georgia's in a really good place. I think there's a lot of momentum. I think that offensive line, I don't want to say they've overperformed, but they've performed better than most would have expected if I told you they would start 6 different offensive line combinations in the first 6 games.
You talk about the second half of the season. That's why we're at the halfway point now, moving on to the second half of the season. Well, what's Georgia done in the second half this year? Well, they only shut out Alabama. Right. Last week shut out Auburn, pretty much shut out Kentucky except for a garbage time when the starters weren't even in the game. So this is a team that really does well in the second half. Can this Georgia team do it? And that kind of gets me to the other point of we kind of know who this team is now, right? Yeah. Like, there's no, we go through the summer because we don't get to watch practice. There's a lot of questions. What is this team? What's this Georgia team? We are halfway through now. We know who this Georgia team is. And the thought that comes to my mind, you think of boxers. Who's a guy with like a famous iron jaw? Like some guy that's just going to take Rocky Marciano or, you know, some of these guys who are just going to get beat on. And that's Georgia. They will. You can hit them square in the mouth, and it's happened multiple times this year. And Georgia may even get knocked down in the first round, right? But they're going to get back up, and this is a team that's going to fight you all the way through the 12 rounds. So I think this is a Georgia team, and it kind of comes from the quarterback who literally has taken shots this year and
knocked out,
gotten back up from them. But this is a Georgia team that is going to take everything you've got, and it's going to happen. I almost predicted on this show, Lane Kiffin's going to have a script for that first, and they're going to go down and score. Okay, that's going to happen because that's what this Georgia team is. But they're going to bounce right back and be resilient.
Yeah, and Kirby talked about that. He's like, if you got a really good defense, you're not going to change things, so they kind of know what you're going to do. I mean, he was really preaching to the points that we've been making about slow starts, about other teams being able to script him up, about Georgia needing time to adjust. So the resiliency, that's number one. The fact that Georgia's won 44-41, the fact that they've 20-10, two very different personalities of football games, and yet the Georgia Bulldogs come out on top. The other thing that I thought was interesting that Kirby said, and this week it really kind of plays into his hands, he said, look, this is who we are. We want to be an explosive teams. We're drawing it up. We want to have those and we're going to keep taking shots, and we're going to keep trying to be explosive. But this is a team that's going to gouge you. They're going to get 4, 5, 6, 8, 7, 9 yards and go down the field with those slow, exhausting drives. And typically you say, man, that's kind of boring. But you know what? This week it's kind of exciting because the best way to keep Ole Miss from scoring is to keep their offense off the field. Time of possession is so important in this game. And Ole Miss's run defense, it's not great shakes. It's not as good as Auburn's run defense. It ranks right around Alabama's, which, again, was not a great run defense. If I'm not mistaken, Georgia went for over 200 yards. So if they go over 200 yards and they're marching 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes down the field, keeping Ole Miss off the field, that's advantage Georgia, especially no turnovers, field position. And like you said, I thought you made a great point at the start of the show. This quarterback hasn't been on the road in the SEC yet. He's got to take on Sanford Stadium. And we've seen some really good quarterbacks and really good programs that haven't been able to handle that Sanford Stadium crowd.
And Mike alluded to what Kirby Smart said after the Auburn. Who is this Georgia team? What is the identity? He laid it out pretty plainly after the Auburn game. Take a listen.
That's really who we are, though. Like, we don't have these explosive plays, and I've come to the conclusion, I want them. Yeah, we're going to scheme for them. We're going to put them together. We're going to keep doing it. We're going to try. We're going to throw the ball downfield. We're going to hit Noah. But that's who we are. We're a stay out of third and long. We're going to run the ball. We're going to hit quick passing game. We're going to use Gunner's legs. And we've had several of those, if you think about it, these long drives. The problem is we're having them on defense too, you know, and it's hard. Because I felt like the first half we spent the whole – I was 20-6, or I don't know what it was, but the time of possession was way out of whack. And I'm okay with that as your identity. but you need to play really good defense behind that kind of identity, and we've played okay defense. I mean, it's crazy how good we can play at times and how poorly we can play at times.
Kirby says, yeah, you can be that identity. You got to play good defense, and that is something true about this Georgia team. If you're going to have long drives, you got to have a defense that can back you up, especially if you're going to go 3-4. It's almost like the old 3 yards in a cloud of dust, although there's not much dust out there. The grass is pretty well taken care of, but that's Georgia going to grind you.
Yeah, and that's what Gunner does, right? This is what Gunner does really well. I mean, I think he's making better decisions. I think he looks better every game. I think he looks more comfortable. I like the decision-making that I'm seeing. Again, no turnovers, that's the biggest thing. And he's taking some shots downfield. Thought it was really big, and you noticed it after the game. Kirby Smart had a little hug there for Noah Thomas. Getting Noah Thomas involved. That 30-yard catch, it's only one catch, but from a confidence standpoint, now this guy's a part of it. Now Gunner knows he's going to be open. I mean, he was running wide open. It was a great run and catch down to the 2-yard line, set up the game-tying touchdown. You have added another weapon to the arsenal. Halfway through the season, Georgia just keeps getting better, adding some new pieces. We saw Nate Frazier back in there. Turned out Chauncey Bowens might have been a little bit banged up. If you wondered why he wasn't starting, I was a little suspicious of that. True enough, they got him some much-needed rest. You got Frazier back on track, and you still got all these weapons. And we said, well, you're running the ball, Cody. That might seem boring, but I remember talking to Mark Stoops. He said, man, they make it hard on you. They do it so many different ways. Do you know that last year Mike Bobo led the nation in fourth down conversions? And this year they're hitting at about a 67% clip. So for all you Bobo critics out there, when the chips are down and you really need to play, Bobo's done a pretty nice job dialing it up, and he did it again Saturday night against Auburn and really just squeezed the air out of him on that final drive. That 4th and 3 call was there all day and enabled Georgia to put that game away, and I think it's going to enable them to take Ole Miss out of rhythm, especially on offense, because I think the Dogs plan on holding the ball a long time on Saturday.
Yeah, a couple things about that. One thing, it almost made boots on the ground this week, but having Nate Frazier in on that drive late in the third quarter when Georgia's trying to run the ball and run the clock out, Frazier was up there, 2 arms across that football.
Like a baby.
He was holding that thing so tight. But what it talks to the trust that Georgia still has in Nate Frazier to have him in running the football at that time. But Georgia, it is a team that has grinded it out. It was interesting to hear. You talk about Noah Thomas and what Georgia can do there. Gunner Stockton was our special guest at the press conference today. They rolled him in, and we weren't expecting it. We get to hear from Gunner mostly just after the games, and we don't get to hear from much. Now, he will not say a ton.
Same kind of answers.
It is very much.
You think he's conservative with the ball in his hands. You ought to hear him behind the podium, right?
Yes, he is not going to give you a ton. But one of the things that I wrote it down, he did say today, I got to cut it loose a little more, which is the same thing we heard from Kirby Smart last week when Kirby was almost happy he threw the interception against Kentucky. But Gunner acknowledges, hey, maybe I should cut it loose a little more. And now we move into the second half. Is this the time Georgia can use a guy like Noah Thomas? It almost feel like getting a new player or getting a guy back from injury because you hadn't used him at all this year. All of a sudden, this weapon, that could work. And Kirby says we're going to 3, 4, 5 yards you down the field. There are explosive plays to be had, and they have been some this year.
It's been quite a blueprint when you think about Josh McCray's emergence against Tennessee. You're like, oh, there's the powerful runner right when you need him. And, oh, there's the 30-yard completion to Noah Thomas to set up the game-tying touchdown. Kirby's blueprint, his planning, look, there's a reason why he's the best coach in the country. The numbers are irrefutable. All you have to do is look at the numbers and his record against these teams and how he's won games in different ways. Lane Kiffin said that. Said he's one of the best ever because he wins in all these different personality games, and he wins the vast majority of the close games as well because these Georgia players believe in the process. And again, that's why I said that Auburn game, to me, you couldn't have scripted it any better. The team had to come off the mat, on the road, band together, complementary football, forced turnover, clean offense. I mean, just all the way around. You know, that bus was floating when it left the Plains with that 20-10 victory. After, Cody, we watched most of those first 28 minutes, and I'll be honest with you, it wasn't looking real good.
No, they were. That's a team that just, for a lot of reasons, the defense couldn't get a stop, and then the offense comes in, and we'll share this in just a moment. They got on the field like 30 minutes after the game. It took forever for them to actually get out there, and then they were out there and gone just like that and getting the ball back very much moving forward. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. We'll wrap up kind of this identity of this team.
Yeah.
And we talked about this, a team that's going to take a punch and keep punching back. Gunner Stockton is that guy to me. He was coached in high school by Jabo Shaw, who played at Georgia Tech, Georgia Southern. But it was Jabo's brother who he reminds me a lot of, is Connor Shaw, who was just one tough son of a gun. Yeah. Gunner, a couple times, he would get, I mean, obviously he was targeted in that game.
No call on that.
Nobody's
talking about that today.
A couple times, and so he gets up, he just shakes it off. He says, I don't like laying on the ground very much, but he is just so tough, and I think he fully embodies what this Georgia team is. I think of last year in the kid gloves that Kirby had to, okay, all right, you're my quarterback, Carson.
Carson back.
And you had some of those moments. This guy, he could take all of it and then some.
Yeah, he's built that way, and that's the intangible that Kirby Smart saw. So that's why I said, even though he may not have the most NFL arm talent, he may not be the fastest guy, that grit and that character, that really helps the identity, because there's a lot of guys around him, Cody, that are doing it for the first time and needed to hear Gunner. Remember after the Alabama game when he said, I'm going to look myself in the mirror? That's leadership. Now, he didn't say much, but that was a very important quote that he took personal accountability. I like it when when quarterbacks find a way to blame Jake Fromm was the master of that. It didn't matter what happened. Jake Fromm was going to take responsibility that it was his fault. And when you have a leader like that, the other players notice that. And they appreciate that, because Gunner realizes he is the leader of this football team. To Cody's point, that identity translates and it carries over. When you pull games out like this and the teammates see Gunner get it done on that 4th and 6 throw to London Humphrey in the end zone. They see Gunner get it done with the Superman dive into the end zone, even though Kirby wanted him to slide. Sorry, Kirby, that ain't happening. You ain't taking that killer instinct out of Gunner. But those are the sorts of plays that win the locker room and give the team confidence that no matter what the score is, no matter what the situation is, they got a guy that's going to battle until the end. And I think that Gunner Stockton has proven that he can do that.
All right, we'll have more on Gunner in just a minute. We also got an injury update coming up in Boots on the Ground. We'll also get Mike's view on what's going on across the SEC. Another couple big upsets this past weekend to talk about. We'll do all of that coming up after the break. It's On the Beat, presented by Ingalls.
And it's the first title in team history. Here it is. And lightning strikes twice. Back-to-back championships. 3 in a row. They've done it again.
Where did those cheese come from? Relax. They're from Ingalls.
Can I eat this now?
Welcome back to the show. We were able to share a couple things. We've seen some of the video on the show already today. Gunner Stockton doing the Superman into the end zone, the fumble at the goal line. Some of the things I was able to capture on the plains in Auburn, and it was loud down there. But there was also some stuff that not going to make the cut of the highlight, but I think is really interesting to Georgia fans. And the first thing we'll talk about is Gunner Stockton. So the very first drive for Auburn, as they drove down the field, it felt like it took forever. And this whole game felt like it took forever. Yeah. But it was interesting to me about halfway through, there was, I don't know if it was an injury or a review or a timeout, but they went to commercial, and Gunner's like had to get out there and stay warm. And I was like, man, it was really a long time. So as we show you the video, you'll see it was 41 minutes from the time that Georgia left the field at the end of warm-ups until Gunner Stockton got up, and he's like, dude, it's been 41 minutes. I got to get up and get warm. So he gets up and he throws a little bit, and he would have to wait another 8 minutes of real time before he would actually get onto the football field. It was 49 minutes from warm-up to the first snap. And as a quarterback, in this game you've been building up all day. It's a night game. You've been waiting to go, ready to go, and you're just having to sit. It was, 16 minutes from kickoff to this point where he's warming up. Another 8 minutes, 24 minutes from kickoff to he got his first snap. That is tough on a quarterback. You're sitting there and you're all amped up, and that adrenaline that was there as you ran out of the tunnel kind of drops, and then you got to figure out what you're going to do on offense. Georgia goes 6 plays and out, doesn't get the ball back the rest of the first quarter.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when you mention it, when you put it like that, Cody. You wonder if that throws the team off a little bit. Got to be hard to kind of fire up the engines, like you said, when you've been standing over there for so long. And of course, Auburn did score on their opening drive, so now you're playing from behind a little bit. But I think that's a really good point. I know Kirby's talked about the slow starts. He mentioned it again today. He said, hey, can't keep playing from behind. This team's not really built for that. So I think that's going to be a big area of emphasis going into the Ole Miss game. And I think that's going to be a big key to the game. I think if Georgia can play even or stay a little bit ahead, I mean, I certainly think that increases their chances of winning tremendously.
Yeah, Georgia would always prefer to receive the second half kick for reasons like we saw this week, where they had the 10 points in those that last drive of the third quarter or second quarter, first drive of the third quarter. So they were always going to run receive. But Gunner said today, I'd rather just get the ball and go play.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. I think that said something. I think that speaks to what you were saying about the slow start.
All right, one of the other things we caught, this was at the end of the game. It was a big win for so many Georgia guys. We saw Kirby Smart up on the table cheering, and you've probably seen that video. The video you maybe haven't seen, which I captured, which was a really cool moment, was Drew Bobo coming off the field. Drew Bobo, who played for Auburn High School in Auburn, Alabama. His dad was coaching at Auburn during his career. He knows everybody on that other sideline. He said he's watched games from the student section before. What he was being recruited was 1 point committed to Auburn. So he comes off the field. You could tell how much this means. And it's kind of a unique thing for Drew because Mike is the offensive coordinator, his family is down on the field. So Drew gets to go over, and there's his mom to give him a hug. There's his sisters and his brother all there to greet him. So it was a really cool moment for Drew Bobo to celebrate this win over this team. It means just a little bit more to him.
Yeah, quietly having an all-SEC type of year. You look at the PFF grades, he's the highest graded guy. You think about it, we really haven't seen any fumbled snap exchanges. You know, he's done a great job identifying the mic and keeping those line calls straight. You don't see too many blown assignments on the Georgia offensive line. I think Drew Bobo, healthy. I think he's been the stabilizing factor on this Georgia offensive line.
And he's had to bring along a couple of freshmen as well. That's not an easy thing. So great moment there to see him with his family. We asked Drew Bobo about how big this win is after the game.
This game means a lot to me just because I lived here for 1 year, and I know so many people. I know multiple people on the Auburn team, people that work at Auburn. I know so many of my friends at Auburn High School. I mean, Auburn High School has probably one Alabama fan, one Georgia fan. The rest are all Auburn fans. And I just know so many Auburn people. They've been texting me all day. It's just good to come out with a win.
It is always good when people are texting you and you can stick it to them a little bit. And by the way, Drew Bobo 2-0 against Auburn. It was last year, this game, where he had to step in and be the starter for Jared Wilson. So congratulations to Drew Bobo. We're talking offensive line. That'll be our last piece of information here. Pre-game, all week, we kind of knew Ernest Green was questionable. He was going to be a game-time decision. I got a little video of Ernest pre-game so you can see what it looked like, how close. Well, he was suited up in that 71 as he came out there, but he was not running reps with the first team pre-game. It was pretty clear he was not going to play, but there you see him there. He's been dealing with the back. Is he getting closer? It certainly looks like. He wasn't dressed out the last two games before this one, so there he is. That's how he's moving. There's a little injury update there on Ernest Green.
Yeah, and we'll find out more at 8 o'clock on Wednesday night when they put out the official availability reports. That gets updated throughout the week, but I wonder what Ernest I think he was listed as questionable for this game, so as you said, Cody, sounds like he's getting closer to being able to play.
And if we're on that note, a guy who was also listed as questionable throughout the week, Monroe Freeling, Kirby Smart said today in the press conference, I wasn't sure we should even bring him on the bus. I don't know what it was worth.
Didn't start.
Monroe Freeling, oh, by the way, SEC Offensive Lineman of the Week. Yeah. Kirby Smart said 4 letters, G-U-T-S, guts, is what it took from Monroe Freeling.
Yeah, came in on the third series of the game in place of Bo Hughley, who got the start there. And, you know, like Kirby was saying, you know, watching him run Wednesday, Thursday, limping around out there, you would have never thought he could play. And Monroe texts the coach and says, Coach, I'm going and I'm playing. Well, alrighty then. Well, that's a text message Kirby Smart could appreciate.
There you go. There's a little extra bonus boots on the ground. You see Monroe Freeling looking at that ankle there pre-game. Again, I wasn't sure he was going to play at all looking at him pre-game, but sure enough got out there and wins SEC Offensive Lineman of the Week. So that is your boots on the ground. We'll have a little bit more from this game even on the pre-game show. So Kaylee and I on the DawgNation Game Day show, I share a little extra boots on the ground, so be sure to check that out 2 hours before kickoff between Georgia and Ole Miss. So a 1:30 start time on the Game Day show this week. It's on the DawgNation.com and also DawgNation YouTube channel, so be sure to check out Kaylee with that. All right, the other thing we do every week is we talk about what's going on around the SEC. We do it with Mike's 30,000-foot view. So the folks out in Las Vegas, Mike, they didn't think it would necessarily be an upset. They favored Texas going into that game against Oklahoma, but all of a sudden I guess it's the cliche. Texas is back.
Well, I guess so.
They've risen.
John Mateer was back too, and that didn't help. He threw 3 interceptions. Maybe he shouldn't have been back, but you really got to appreciate Texas, the resiliency they showed. Look, they got a good defense. We know that, and they're back in the top 25. They're going to be a threat by the time they come to Sanford Stadium. Arch Manning had a pretty good day. They did a pretty nice job taking care of the football. They were able to get some turnovers against Oklahoma, and you start looking at Oklahoma, you say, okay, maybe their best win of the year was over Auburn by a touchdown, and they needed some help. Auburn fans remember that. They really did. The SEC had an issue, a statement for that one. So you just kind of wonder how good Oklahoma really is, and it's probably too soon to count out Texas. They still have a pretty favorable schedule.
All right, so the team that Texas lost to the week before, Florida Gators, we were wondering, is this the resurgence? Is this the time? Can Florida put it back together again? Well, they ran into Texas A&M, who stays perfect on the year. A&M wins that 34-17.
Yeah, pretty good football team with Marcel Reed, another one of these dual-threat quarterbacks. A lot of guys that have played a lot of football in College Station. And I don't know about you, Cody. I've always wondered, A&M's been in the league a long, long time. You would have thought they would have somehow, even by accident, made it to the SEC title game, but they never did. This may be their best chance. They don't play Georgia. Georgia's not on their schedule. I don't believe they play Alabama either, if I'm not mistaken. I think they do have Texas on the road later in the season. But A&M is well-positioned. That win over Florida. Look, the Gators are playing good football. When Georgia goes to Jacksonville, that's not going to be an easy game. Don't be fooled by that. A&M, College Station, that's a really difficult place to play. They have a ton of momentum right now. Big win for A&M, the highest-ranked team in the SEC.
All right, the other one we were listening to on our way down 85 to Auburn last week was Alabama and Missouri. This game pretty tight, but Alabama – I think Alabama fans, some fans wish they would have won by more, beating Missouri, but this is a good Missouri team, and Bama just goes through that. Well, what a stretch it was. It doesn't get any easier as they got Tennessee coming up, but they go Georgia, beat Vandy, beat Mizzou on the road, and then, just cycling through these teams.
Yeah, dangerous Missouri team. And for some perspective, Auburn a favorite over that Missouri team with one loss this next week at Jordan here. So that win over Auburn was very valuable. That was a very good Auburn team. But Missouri, they really had some opportunities. A fake punt, and there was no clear angle. Did the guy make it? Did he not? There was an interception where the quarterback and the receiver got crossed up, but they were able to run the ball effectively. They knocked Jam Miller out of the game. The alpha dog on the Crimson Tide was motionless on the sideline. Clean hit from a Missouri defender. Missouri is a team to be reckoned with. That Missouri-Auburn game, that's going to be something to behold. But to your point, Alabama now, this is 3 emotional wins in a row.
Right.
They had to get up to beat Georgia. They had to beat a pretty good Vanderbilt team that kind of had them on the ropes for a minute there. And then they had to outlast Missouri on the road. Can they get up one more time? Because here come the Tennessee Vols to Tuscaloosa. And Tennessee, by the way, they've been skating by pretty close. Had to come from behind at Mississippi State. Had to hold off Bobby Petrino in Arkansas. Alabama going to be a better team. Another really key game in the SEC between Alabama and Tennessee under the lights in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, moving forward this week, another big one is at Nashville. Is that Vanderbilt team welcomes LSU, who has moved back quietly, moved back up in the rankings.
Well, you wonder what's going to happen there because these are two teams that, to me, they're kind of on the periphery. Now, record-wise, they're both still eligible. I'll be honest. I'm not taking either one of these teams as serious as I am Georgia, Alabama, A&M. But technically, they're still in it, and one of them could catch fire. Pretty talented quarterback in Diego Pavia. LSU's defense, we know what they got with Whit Weeks. I mean, that defense really travels for the Tigers. That's a big game. To me, that's a loser-out game. The loser of that game, I believe, will not make the college football playoff. The winner stays in contention for the 12-team field. And right now, Cody, ESPN projecting 6 of the 12 teams in the college football playoff to be from the SEC.
Interesting stuff right there. One of the other things that you just reminded me of, we talk about Alabama and Vandy, and it was the big revenge game for Alabama. As Kirby smart about today, about, hey, Ole Miss, I remember shooting all the pictures last year of these kids running on the field and your players trying to get off and avoid. He said, I'm not a big revenge guy. You believe it? It will not be brought up that they lost last year at Ole Miss.
I don't know, Cody. I mean, I don't think that's a part of the game plan. I know Kirby's pointed out those were different guys. It was Jackson Dart, the starting quarterback for the New York Giants out there.
Sweetheart.
Yeah, there was, 3 or 4 NFL guys in their front 7 that I don't see there right now. That defense is not scary like it was last year. It is a different Ole Miss team. It's a different Georgia team, too. A lot of new faces, a lot of new names. So to Kirby's point, I do think the revenge factor is probably a little bit more subdued. feud. It will travel with the fan base, though.
Yes.
They will know who's on the other sideline, and these Georgia fans will want revenge on the Ole Miss Rebels.
And they have been called out by Kirby
Yeah,
Smart. That
called
is
the
for
Dogs,
sure.
yeah.
All right, speaking of calling the Dogs and big games and revenge, it's going to be on the mind of Georgia Tech as Georgia takes on Georgia Tech at Mercedes-Benz Stadium this year. Last year we were treated to clean, old-fashioned 8. You could be there to watch this year's edition. First time on a neutral field for these teams. Going to be really fun to watch. So Georgia and Georgia Tech going to be inside Mercedes-Benz Stadium. This is a Black Friday, not as late as we were last year. This one's going to be a 3:30 kick between Georgia and Tech, but you can be there. It's sometimes hard to get Georgia tickets. Usually at Georgia Tech, Dog fans will show out and really show Bobby Dodd Stadium to be a home field. You can do that again this year at Mercedes-Benz. Go to mercedes-benz.com/tickets. You can buy tickets for clean, old-fashioned hate Georgia and Georgia Tech. Should be a fun one in late November. It's the classic. If you've never been to one, this is your chance. Get in there and watch the Dogs and the Jackets and what could be a playoff preview or two teams that are
play-in game.
Certainly getting heading towards the college football playoff this year. All right, we're going to wrap up the show today, and I can't let you not talk about this because you've covered this sport for a long time. You've covered the Big Ten. You covered the SEC. We see James Franklin. All of a sudden, you blink. It was yesterday he was up on Oregon. Today he's out of a job. Your thoughts on James Franklin being fired after back-to-back really disappointing losses?
Yeah, state of the game. We've done a story on that on AJC.com and DawgNation about the trend for earlier firings than ever. And 3 more coaches get fired last weekend, including James Franklin. A shock because of the size of the buyout and because of the stature of the program. Like you said, Cody, just 2 weeks ago, the guy's in the top 5. Now he's out of a job. Well, what that tells me is there were probably some things going on beyond the field. Number one, he lost the team, clearly. You don't lose to UCLA and Northwestern in back-to-back weeks with the talent that Penn State has if there's not something missing in the locker room. But from the standpoint of the relationship between the head coach and the administration, which just underscores the importance of the relationship that Josh Brooks has here at Georgia with Kirby Smart. I mean, they're really lucky. I mean, Josh is a guy that started out as an equipment manager for Nick Saban at LSU. He'd been around this thing. He was a student assistant under Jimbo Fisher. He thought he was going to be a coach for a while. Then he was a football operations guy for Mark Richt here at Georgia. Then he got into facilities, which turned out to be a really big deal when you looked at the construction of the new $85 million state-of-the-art football building, which has been such a huge tool in recruiting. You look at the improvements to Sanford Stadium, the widened concourses. So big to have an athletic director that understands football arguably better than any athletic director in the country, and now a part of so many of these NCAA commissions. So you got a guy in Josh Brooks that's able to communicate all these things to Kirby Smart, keep him tapped into what's happening behind the scenes with the College Sports Commission or the NCAA, and deliver to Kirby what he needs for championship football. A lot of these ADs, they look good on a billboard, but they don't know how to throw the ball with the laces going the right way. They just sit across from the head coach and not, okay. Now, Brooks can have a conversation, and Kirby has respect from Josh and vice versa. That is a big part, that connection between the administration, President Moorhead with Josh as the interpreter to Kirby Smart, a really big part of why Georgia is able to keep this thing going in the right direction, even as the game has changed right before our eyes. Think about all the changes since 2016, Cody. It's a different game than it was when Kirby got into Athens as the head coach.
All right, so we see James Franklin out. We saw Sam Pittman a couple weeks ago get fired from Arkansas. This was last year. We did a show about is the SEC gone soft because nobody got fired at the end of last year. Obviously, Billy Napier with another loss this week. Do
you think Florida fans want to see him lose? Do you think they want a reason to fire Billy? It just feels like every time there's all this buzz and Kurt Cignetti at Indiana, can you pull him out? And Billy Napier, he just wins just enough. And the Florida fans are, geez, do they want this guy to keep winning or do they not? It's kind of a unique, interesting situation.
The other one I wonder about now, after last week, is Hugh Freeze. I think Bama fans or Auburn fans have had such big expectations, and Hugh Freeze gets up on the podium and says, we keep finding ways to lose games. Like, dude, you're the coach.
That's not what you're supposed to say. That's not going to charge up the locker room or get the fan base excited. Part of me wonders if Hugh just ready to take that $15 million and go to the house, because that buyout, that's 2 more years' pay, and he gets another job. So I'm not going to call Hugh Freeze a quitter. I think he's a competitive guy. They had a really good game plan. We know he's played Kirby teams tough. But that post game, that was one dejected, coach. He sounded more like Deputy Dawg than anybody that was going to take over the SEC anytime soon.
So we think that one could be happening this year?
You know what, with the buyout as low as it is after the season, yeah, but again, who are you going to hire, and how do the Auburn Tigers finish? I mean, what if they beat Missouri? What if they beat Alabama? It's not out of the question for Auburn to run the table.
Yeah, their team can fight with anybody. We saw that this past weekend. So interesting stuff there. As we get moving on to Ole Miss week, another top 10 opponent, Georgia and Ole Miss going to duel it out. On the beat, we like to be in that press conference, talk about all the things. We had Georgia, Alabama. Kirby barely mentioned the fans beforehand. The fact that he got up there today and said, first things first, tell me, fans, I am calling you out this week. It's different than it was. It's only going to be fire that crowd up more, especially, again, fans, I think, are thinking revenge, so they're going to be all fired up for Under the Lights at Sanford Stadium.
Yeah, and I like the way Kirby handles the big weeks like this with College Game Day. It's really not a distraction for Georgia. They've been here and done it so many times. I feel like he's got a really nice blueprint in terms of how he handles the week, how he keeps the lion in the cage, so to speak. You don't want these guys to get too amped up too early in the week. You got to kind of save it. Now, Kiffin, to his credit, they didn't sing the fight song after they beat Washington State. They treated it as a loss. He said he kept his athletic director from giving a game ball to. So Lane Kiffin playing a little psychology there too with his team. Yeah, you won against Washington State, but we tried to treat it as a loss because 24-21, wasn't exactly what. So Kiffin doing a nice job as well. Both of these teams, though, I mean, they're going to come out like a missile shot out of a cannon. You're going to see some collisions. You're going to see some heavy hits. You're going to see some SEC football Saturday.
And what that game against Washington State told me is Ole Miss didn't plan a lick for Washington State. No. They have spent 2 weeks getting ready to come to Sanford Stadium.
Oh, they're looking ahead, of course. I mean, this is the marquee showdown. I thought it was funny last week on the SEC teleconference when Lane Kiffin was trying to sell the game, the first-place SEC team against the first-place Pac-12 team. Aren't there only 2 teams in the Pac-12 now? But you got to. He's really playing this first place in the SEC thing up, and you kind of wonder if Lane does that, kind of tongue-in-cheek. But think about what this win would mean for Lane Kiffin. They put in their game notes, Lane Kiffin is 2-1 against Georgia. They're counting that win at okay, coach. Okay, you're 2-1 against Georgia. Do a little bit more to get Kirby fired up. So I thought that was pretty interesting, and I believe that Lane and Kirby, only maybe 2 of the 16 coaches with 100 wins that are active in college football. I think the third one in the SEC is Brian Kelly. You don't really think of Lane Kiffin as a guy that's been around a long time. Did you know he's a year older than Kirby Smart?
I did not know that.
Yeah.
He definitely looks young, right? Keeping it fresh, I'm sure. Maybe getting some help, you think?
Well, we won't get into too many details of Lane's personal life on this show.
Good stuff right there. All right, that's going to wrap it up for On the Beat. We will be back here next week talking. It'll be a bye week next week, so it'll be interesting. We may have a special guest on the way. We'll talk more about that when we get there. But that's going to wrap it up for Mike Griffith. I'm Cody Chaffins here in Athens. We'll see you next Monday night right here on The Beat.